The galaxy trembled when the Vorath sang. Their ballads were not music but bloodshed. Wars waged for the sheer thrill of composition, entire civilizations carved into verses of ruin. Across 1,000 star systems they hunted, not for conquest or hunger, but to etch their sagas into the marrow of the universe. Each fallen foe became a stanza, each dying world, a chorus. Their poets dueled with antimatter cannons, their elegies written in the screams of collapsing cities. To be hunted by the Vorath was to be immortalized, they claimed, a mercy. But Earth was different. The Vorath did not broadcast their usual prelude of thundering odes when they breached the Milky Way. No boasts of claws sharpened on neutron stars, no sonnets praising the heat of human fear. Instead, their scouts returned from the third rock with twitching whiskers and a single, bewildered transmission. They fight wrong. The humans dug traps that reeked of decay. They laced battlefields with crude, laughing idols. Their weapons were not blades or beams but noise, shrill, dissonant, vulgar noise, that clawed at the Vorath's crystalline eardrums. Worse, they refused to die beautifully. No last stands on glittering cliffs, no final curses worthy of epics, just survival, stubborn and graceless, as if dignity were a currency they'd never earned. The Vorath high versemasters debated for 3 rotations. To chronicle such a species would stain their canon, yet to abandon the hunt, unthinkable. In the end they compromised. Earth would be a footnote, a cautionary refrain in the grand song, a story no Vorath would ever tell twice. Chapter 1. The Alaskan wind howled through the pines like a wounded animal, its voice raw and ancient, scraping against the walls of Colonel Marcus Rook's cabin. He stood at the window, a silhouette against the frost-veined glass, his breath fogging the pane. Outside, the snow devoured the landscape, a white void where the horizon bled into the sky. It reminded him of the savannas he'd once stalked, endless, indifferent, a stage for predators. But here, the cold was the apex hunter. It gnawed at the logs, the steel, the marrow. It didn't care about trophies. Rook's hand drifted to the scar on his jaw, a relic from a leopard in Botswana. The client had wanted a kill with character. He'd gotten one. The leopard's claws had torn through Rook's cheek before the bullet found its heart. The man, some oil baron, with a laugh like a jackal, had mounted the beast's head in his Dubai penthouse. Rook had kept the scar, a reminder, not of the hunt, but of the price tag sewn into its hide. He turned from the window. The cabin's single room was a museum of contradictions. A military issue cot hugged one wall, its sheets taut, corners folded with geometric precision. Beside it, a dented kettle hissed on a wood stove, steam curling into the chill. But the floor was a chaos of traps, coils of barbed wire, pressure plates, canisters of viscous fluid that reeked of rot, and the gnomes, dozens of them frozen in garish ceramic grins, their painted eyes glinting in the firelight. Cloaking tech hummed inside their hollow bellies, a gift from a DARPA engineer who'd owed him a favor. Turn 'em on, the man had said, and their landmines even a satellite wouldn't see. Rook had named one Fred, for luck. A knock at the door, 2 raps, hesitant. Private Torres then. The kid had hands that shook when he held a rifle. Rook had seen it in the mess hall, the way Torres' spoon had quivered over his stew, broth slopping onto the table. Fear, or the cold, didn't matter. Weakness was a scent. The Vorath would smell it. Sir. Torres stood at the threshold, his parka dusted with snow. Comms picked up something. You should. It's not like the others. Rook followed him into the storm. The outpost was a cluster of prefab huts hunched against the wind, their roofs sagging under the weight of winter. Inside the comms shack, screens flickered with static. Corporal V, her hair shaved to black bristle, didn't look up. Signals clean, and loud. She tapped a key. The speakers erupted. It wasn't a voice. Not human. A resonance deep as a cello's lowest register, vibrating through the bones. Words, if they could be called that, swirled in the static, vowels stretching into growls, consonants clicking like claws on stone. Rook's teeth ached. The translation scrolled across the screen, green text bleeding into poetry. O trembling flesh of fragile spheres, we come to carve your final verse. Your skies shall chorus with our glory, and earth imbibe your reddest story. V snorted. Edgar Allan Poe on steroids. Rook said nothing. He'd heard that cadence before, not in poetry, in the wild. The low rhythmic chuffing of lions, circling a kill, a prelude to the rush. But this was orchestrated, ritual. The hairs on his neck prickled. Origin? He asked. Atmospheric entry, 5 objects, burning over the Bering Sea. DoD says they're meteors, but the pattern. V pulled up a map. Red dots bloomed across the Arctic. They're spreading, hunting. The word hung in the air. Tora's breath hitched. Rook stared at the dots. 5. A pride then. He'd seen it in Africa. Lions driving prey into ambush, teamwork draped in violence. But these hunters wore ships like skin, wrote odes to slaughter. Sound general alert, he said. Mobilize the militia, and V, dig up every scrap on that translation. Their poetry, it's a blueprint. Arrogance leaves cracks. Night fell like a guillotine. Rook paced the perimeter, his boots crunching through ice. The gnomes waited under the snow, Fred grinning up at him from a drift. He'd placed them in a staggered crescent around the outpost's east flank. The Vorath would come from there. The wind carried their stench now, ozone and musk, like a thunderstorm rolling over a carcass. They wanted to be smelled, wanted fear to ripen the meat. He paused at the storage shed. Barrels of rancid honey lined the walls, their lids crusted with age. The militia had laughed when he'd ordered them salvaged from a failed apiary in Fairbanks. Bait for bears, sir. One had joked. Rook had let them laugh, let them think him a madman, better than the truth, that he'd studied the Vorath's biology reports. Their olfactory receptors were 1,000 times keener than a bloodhound's, a strength, and a weakness. He loaded a spray rig, the honey's stench seeping through his mask. Rotting flowers, gangrene, sweet decay, perfect. The first scream tore through the dark, at 0300, human. From the east watchtower, Rook was already moving, his rifle cold against his cheek. Flames licked the sky. The tower was a pyre, its timbers groaning. Shadows moved in the smoke. Not shadows, shapes. Lion-like, but wrong. Too tall, their shoulders rippling with muscle that seemed to flow like liquid. Manes shimmered, not with hair, but with filaments that caught the firelight, like spun metal. One turned, eyes like molten gold locked onto his. It roared, the sound of physical force, and the air rippled. Rook fired. The shot went wide, not a miss, a distraction. The Vorath lunged, its claws etching grooves in the frozen earth. He sprinted west, toward the tree line, toward Fred. The Vorath followed, of course it did. He was prey, running, stumbling, heart hammering, a performance. He'd played this role before, for rhinos, for tigers. The key was to let them feel the thrill of the chase, let their hunger outpace their caution. He hit the tree line. The Vorath's breath seared his neck. Now, he thumbed the detonator. The gnome exploded in a bloom of fire and shrapnel. The Vorath howled, a sound that curdled the air. Rook rolled his parka smoking. The creature thrashed, its foreleg a mangled ruin. Black blood steamed in the snow. It bared fangs, a growl building in its throat. Then it paused, sniffed, its nostrils flared, recoiling. The honey. Rook had doused the trees, the rocks, himself. The Vorath's nose twitched. It retched, a wet guttural sound. For a moment, predator and prey stared at each other. Then Rook pressed a second button. Gilbert Gottfried's voice screeched from the speakers, hidden in the gnomes. A 3-legged dog walks into a saloon. The Vorath froze, its mane bristled, filaments, standing erect. A high-pitched whine escaped its throat. Pain, disgust? It stumbled back, shaking its head as if to dislodge the noise. Rook didn't smile. He'd chosen the audiobook carefully. The comedian's voice, shrill, grating, human, was a weapon, an insult. The Vorath fled, not in fear, but revulsion. Rook watched it vanish into the dark. Around him, the forest echoed with Gottfried's nasally punchlines, and the moans of dying men. He knelt, scooped a handful of snow, let it melt on his tongue. The cold burned. Alive then. In the distance, another tower burned. He'd saved the outpost, for now, but as he trudged back, the Vorath's poetry echoed in his skull. Your reddest story, they'd be back, with more verses, with claws sharpened by humiliation. At the comm shack, V handed him a transcript. They're calling us Kavash, she said. Means stain. Says here it's a thing that spoils a hunter's tale. Too ugly for ballads. Rook crumpled the paper. Let them write poems. Let them hunt. He'd filled their sagas with gnomes and honey, and the screams of a dead comedian. Let the galaxy know. Earth's soil was fertile with shame, and from it, they'd reap a harvest of teeth. Chapter 2. The aurora borealis hung above the Alaskan outpost, like a torn veil, its green tendrils clawing at the stars. Colonel Marcus Rook stood on the frozen lake, the ice groaning beneath his boots, as if the earth itself resented, bearing the weight of what was coming. His breath crystallized in the air, each exhale a ghostly confession. The Vorath's retreat had been a pause, not a surrender. Their poetry still hummed in the static of dead radios, their taunts coiled in the frost. Rook's gloves tightened around the thermos of coffee, black, bitter, a taste that matched the aftertaste of survival. He had bought time, not peace, time to dig deeper graves. 3 days had passed since the first attack. The outpost was now a scar on the tundra, its walls patched with sheet metal and hubris. Rook's squad moved through the ruins like shadows, their faces smeared with soot, and the kind of exhaustion that stiffened spines instead of bending them. Private Torres knelt by the eastern trench, threading barbed wire through ice-encrusted stakes. His hands no longer shook. The Vorath had a way of curing tremors. Medic Elena Varga emerged from the comm shack, her parka hanging open to reveal a blood-crusted sweatshirt beneath. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The vial she pressed into Rook's palm was warm, its contents a murky indigo that shimmered like oil. Amazonian frog toxin, distilled into a hallucinogenic mist. Tested it on the captive, she said, her voice a rasp from hours of shouting over artillery. It doesn't kill, just unravels. Her eyes lingered on the vial, on the memory of whatever she'd seen in the lab. Rook pocketed it. Another sin to balance on the scales. They buried the dead at midnight, the frostbite blackened faces of soldiers wrapped in tarps. No prayers, no eulogies, just the crunch of shovels biting permafrost. Rook's hands blistered inside his gloves, the pain a blunt counterpoint to the numbness in his chest. He wondered if the Vorath composed elegies for their own fallen, if their ballads mentioned the stink of human sweat, the vulgarity of grave digging. Probably not. Monsters made better muses. The Vorath returned at dawn, their ship slicing through the cloud cover like obsidian scythes. No poetry this time, only silence, a hunter's silence. Rook watched from the tree line, his rifle stock pressed against the hollow of his cheek. The squad had melted into the terrain, snowdrifts, ice fissures, the skeletal remains of a rusted truck. Torres crouched behind a boulder, his breath stilled, a detonator clenched in his fist. The barbed wire perimeter glinted faintly, each strand daubed with the frog toxin. A welcome mat. They came on foot, this time, 4 Vorath, their manes bristling with metallic filaments that writhed like serpents in the wind. Kara led them, her muzzle scarred from Rook's gnome mine, one eye milky with damage. She sniffed the air, lips peeling back from fangs the length of hunting knives. Rook's trap reeked of rancid honey and diesel, a stench meant to offend, to distract. But Kara paused, her remaining eye narrowing. She barked a command, the sound guttural, alien. The pack split, flanking the outpost. Clever. Rook thumbed his radio. Now, the world erupted. Not in fire, but in noise. Drone speakers hidden in the ruins blared Gilbert Gottfried's voice, distorted. Pitch shifted into a screeching cacophony, layered over the tinny thump of Baby Shark. The Vorath froze, their ears flattening against skulls. Kara snarled, a sound that vibrated in Rook's molars. She lunged forward, directly into the barbed wire. The toxin worked fast. The first Vorath to touch the wire recoiled, its claws raking its own mane, filaments snapping like overstrung guitar strings. It staggered, pupils dilating until its eyes were black pools. Hallucinations, Elena had said. The mind's funhouse mirrors. The beast turned on its packmate, slashing at phantoms only it could see. Kara barked, but her authority frayed as the second Vorath succumbed, howling at the sky, as if the clouds had Spro's teeth. Rook didn't cheer. He tracked Kara through his scope, the crosshairs hovering over her scarred eye. She stood amid the chaos, her growl deepening into something almost mournful. Then she moved, not toward the outpost, but toward the lake, toward him. He exhaled, slow, the way he'd done a lifetime ago, waiting for a Bengal tiger to step into the clearing. But this was no tiger. Kara's gait was fluid, predatory, yet tinged with something he couldn't place. Curiosity, contempt. She halted 10 meters away, her gaze slicing through the scope's lens to meet his. For a heartbeat, they were hunter and hunter. Then she roared. The ice shattered. Rook rolled as the lake erupted, geysers of freezing water swallowing Kara's silhouette. He scrambled backward, rifle abandoned, boots skidding on wet ice. She surged from the water, soaked mane plastered against muscle and swiped. Claws grazed his ribs, tearing through Kevlar like rice paper. Pain bloomed, hot and bright. He fumbled for the pistol at his hip, fired blind. The shot gouged her flank, black blood spraying. She flinched, snarling, but didn't press the attack. Instead she crouched, tail lashing, and hissed a word. Kara's stain. She spat at his feet, a glob of phlegm, and blood melting the snow, then turned and vanished into the tree line. The remaining Vorath followed, dragging their delirious packmates. The speakers died mid-shriek, leaving a silence so thick Rook could hear his own pulse, thundering in his ears. That night, he found Elena in the lab, her face lit by the glow of a Vorath corpse splayed on the autopsy table. Its mane had been shorn, revealing scar tissue arranged in intricate patterns, a language of pain. Their rituals, she said, not looking up. The scars tell stories, hunts, kills. Her scalpel hovered over a claw. This one had a poem carved into its femur, about us. Rook leaned against the doorframe, his ribs bandaged tight. Let me guess, oh hideous hairless apes, your stench offends the stars. She didn't smile. Close, it's a lament. They think we're inglorious, a blight on their art. She nodded to a nearby screen, where lines of translated text scrolled. The humans gnaw victory from the marrow of shame, she read. Their triumph is a cockroach's feast. He grunted. Tell them to put that on a greeting card. But the words stuck. Cockroach's feast. He'd been called worse. Ness. They relocated south as the Vorath strikes intensified, falling back to a derelict biodome in the Amazon, its geodesic panels choked by vines. The jungle breathed here, wet and feverish, the air thick with the drone of cicadas, and the stench of decay. Rook's traps evolved. Cloaked gnomes lurked in bromeliads. Speakers nestled in kapok trees played Gottfried's voice, spliced with jaguar growls. The squad moved like ghosts, their faces smeared with mud and frog toxin. It was here, in the green dark, that Rook faced the captive. The Vorath had been caught in a net laced with sedatives, its mane shorn by Elena to disrupt the filament's resonance. It lay in a bamboo cage, breathing labored, golden eyes tracking Rook with hate that had curdled into something colder. Resignation. You understand me, Rook said, crouching outside the cage. It wasn't a question. The Vorath's ear twitched, the equivalent of a nod. Kara's.
It rossed. Yeah, I've heard. Rook lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the humid air. Why do you hunt us? Really? The Vorath's tongue flicked, a serpentine motion. To sing is to live. We sing the strong, the worthy. It bared its teeth. You are. Noise, unworthy of ballads. Rook exhaled smoke. You spared a soldier. Back in Alaska. Why? The Vorath blinked. Slow, deliberate. Dead flesh cannot inspire. You. It paused, searching for the word. Spoil. Rook stood, grinding the cigarette under his boot. Rook stood, grinding the cigarette under his boot. He thought of the oil baron, the leopard, the way the client had frowned at the bullet hole in the pelt. Messy, he'd said. I wanted art. He left the cage, the Vorath's gaze burning into his back. That night, he dreamt of his daughter's funeral. The way the casket had gleamed, too polished, too small. The priest's words like ash in the wind. The squad regrouped at dawn, their faces haggard. Torath's had a new scar, a Vorath claw's parting gift. Elena pressed a fresh vial into Rook's hand. More toxin, more ghosts to unleash. They didn't speak of the captive. In the end, it was Kara who found them again. She came alone, her mane half singed from a napalm trap, her gait uneven. The squad tensed, rifles rising, but Rook waved them down. Kara halted at the edge of the clearing, her tail lashing. She tossed something into the mud, a human dog tag. Corporal V's, your den reeks of fear. Corralled, the translator strapped to her throat, mangling her vowels into a metallic sneer. You scuttle, hide. You have no, she hissed, struggling. No, wait. Rook stepped forward, palms open. You want wait. He nodded to Torres, who triggered the speakers. This time, it wasn't Gottfried. It was Vivaldi's Winter, warped into a minor key, spliced with the screams of Vorath from Alaska. The sound was beautiful, terrible. Kara shuddered, her main filaments spasming. For a moment, Rook saw it. Doubt, the crack in the predator's armor. Then she lunged, not at him, but at the nearest speaker, shredding it with a swipe. The music died in a burst of sparks. We will not sing of you, she snarled. You will die, forgotten. Rook smiled. It felt like a wound. Then will be the thorn you swallow, the rod in your epic. She left without another word, her shadow dissolving into the trees. The squad exhaled as one. That night, Rook found Elena by the biodome's algae-choked pool. She was cleaning her pistol, the moonlight carving her face into something statuesque. She didn't look up. You kept the captive alive. He sat beside her, the water rippling with tadpoles. Wouldn't you? No. Her tone was flint. But you're not me. He let the silence stretch, heavy with the things they wouldn't say. The captive's words, the daughter's photo hidden in his desk, the way Elena's hand had lingered on his shoulder, after stitching his ribs. They'll keep coming, she said finally. I know. And, he scooped a handful of water, watched it trickle through his fingers. We'll keep surviving, however we have to. She holstered her pistol. However, the jungle hummed around them, a living thing. Somewhere, a Vorath poet howled at the moon, its ballad souring into a dirge.
Chapter 3. Rain fell in sheets over the ruins of Quito, the city's skeletal high-rises jutting through the mist like broken teeth. Colonel Marcus Rook crouched in the shadow of a collapsed church, his fingers tracing the fissures in the stone. The crucifix above the entrance hung upside down, its Christ figure weathered into a faceless wraith. Fitting, he thought. The Vorath had a taste for irony. They'd turned the city into a cathedral of suffering, its streets choked with the ashen remains of their poetry, scrolls etched on human skin, fluttering from lampposts like macabre prayer flags. 3 weeks had passed since the Amazon. 3 weeks of retreat, of traps sprung too late, of villages reduced to charnel pits. The Vorath were learning. No more frontal charges, no more roars heralding their approach. Now they moved like smoke, coiling around settlements, severing supply lines, and they'd brought gifts. Rook adjusted the scope on his rifle, the lens blurring with rain. Half a click east, the Vorath had erected a cage in the plaza, its bars woven from the hull of a downed fighter jet. Inside, a dozen human prisoners huddled, their faces gaunt under the sickly glow of bioluminescent moss the Vorath cultivated for ambiance. A stage. A audience. A lesson. Their bait, Elena said. Materializing beside him, her voice barely a breath, she smelled of iodine and damp earth, her hair knotted into a braid streaked with gray, age or fatigue. You know that. He did. The Vorath had begun taking prisoners alive, parading them in open spaces ripe with explosives. A test. A taunt. How far will your mercy stretch, Kavash? Intel confirms it, she added, pressing a folded photo into his hand. A surveillance still, a man in a tattered UN uniform whispering to a Vorath sentry, Captain Daniel Royce, militia liaison, missing since Calgary. He's the reason Quito fell, traded the defense grid codes for a promise. They lied. Of course. Rook studied the photo. Royce's face was calm, eyes flat as a shark's, a survivor, a pragmatist, a man who'd have thrived in Rook's old world of client dinners and champagne toasts over carcasses. He pocketed the photo. Can we extract the prisoners? Elena's silence was answer enough. The storm worsened after nightfall, the rain curdling into sleet. Rook's squad crept through the subway tunnels, their headlamps carving frail cones of light in the gloom. The walls were scrawled with Vorath glyphs, victory odes maybe, or recipes. The squad didn't care. They passed a train carcass, its seats crusted with lichen, a skeleton still clutching a briefcase. Torres crossed himself. Rook didn't bother. They emerged near the plaza, the cage visible through a crack in the rubble. The Vorath had posted guards, their manes dripping with rain, rifles slung lazily over their shoulders. Human rifles. Another joke. Rook counted 4. No, 5. One lurked in the clock tower, its silhouette blurred by the shattered face of time. He signaled to Torres, ready the charges. The kid nodded, face pale but steady. Growth, Rook supposed. Or decay. The trap was simple, a minefield of cloaked gnomes encircling the plaza, their triggers linked to pressure plates under the prisoner's cage. Blow the Vorath, save the humans. Blow the humans, cripple the Vorath. A choice served on a bed of thorns. Royce stood apart from the other prisoners, his back to the bars, eyes scanning the shadows, waiting. Rook wondered what the Vorath had promised him. Survival? A seat at their feast. Fools and traitors shared the same currency, hope with a half-life. He flipped the detonator's safety off. The explosion, when it came, wasn't his. A grenade erupted from the east, shredding 2 Vorath guards into pulp. The remaining aliens spun, roaring rifles barking. From the ruins, a figure emerged, Kara, her mane matted with blood and mud, flanked by a pack of young Vorath, their scars fresh, unadorned by poetry. Rebels. Rook froze. Vorath in fighting. Kara lunged at the tower sentry, her claws shearing through its throat before it could scream. The young Vorath fell on the others, their attacks frenzied, inelegant. No ballads here. This was butchery. The prisoners screamed. Royce didn't. Rook's finger hovered over the detonator. The trap was still live. One press would kill the Vorath, the rebels, the prisoners. Clean. Efficient. A page from his old playbook. Elena's hand gripped his wrist. Wait. In the plaza, Fora wrenched open the cage, her growl silencing the humans' cries. She pointed to Royce. You. Come. Royce stepped forward, chin raised. Took you long enough. Our deal. Kara's claw punched through his sternum. She lifted him, dangling, like a puppet with its strings cut. Your song is noise, she spat, and hurled his corpse into the ruins. The remaining Vorath rebels herded the prisoners north, toward the mountains. Kara lingered, her gaze sweeping the rubble. She raised her bloodied claw, not a threat, a salute. Then she was gone. Rook lowered the detonator. The ice in his chest thawed, replaced by a colder thing, understanding. They buried Royce in the churchyard, shoveling mud over his remains, until the sleet washed the grave away. No one spoke. The squad knew betrayal, but this was a mirror, cracked and unkind. Elena found Rook atop the clock tower, his boots dangling over the void. The city sprawled below, a carcass picked clean by shadow. She lit a cigarette, the ember a lone star in the gloom. You knew, he said. She exhaled smoke. Intel suggested factionalism. The young Vorath think the elders weak, too invested in art. And Kara, she's a traditionalist. In her way, he snorted. Traditional. A killer who wrote sonnets in blood. Elena's hand brushed his, a fleeting press of skin. You didn't kill the prisoners. No. Would you have? The question hung, barbed. He thought of the leopard, the oil baron's disgust. You didn't even make it beautiful. Yes, he lied. She left him there, the cigarette perched on the ledge like an offering. The Vorath's retreat began at dawn. Rook watched from the foothills, as their ships ascended, sleek and silent, their hulls scored with human graffiti. Kavash, cockroach, rot. The ultimate insult, not a military defeat, a cultural veto. Torres whooped, slapping V's back. Elena knelt in the mud, her shoulders shaking with something that wasn't laughter. Rook felt nothing. Victory was a stone in his shoe. Kara found him one last time at the mass grave, her pelt streaked with ash. She tossed a claw at his feet, her own, severed at the joint. A trophy. You are a stain, she hissed. But stains endure. He pocketed the claw. Tell your poets that. She bared her fangs, a jagged smile, and vanished into the mist. That night, in the biodome's skeletal remains, Rook opened his desk drawer. Elena's photo lay there, his daughter, age 7, grinning on a beach he'd never visited. He'd forgotten the sound of her laugh. He placed Kara's claw beside it. 2 relics. 2 sins. Outside, the squad drank in silence, their toast to the dead lost in the rain. Rook joined them, his shadow stretching long under the moon, a hunter's shadow, bleached of glory. The war was over. The war was just beginning. Chapter 4. The war ended not with a roar, but with a sigh. The Vorath ships vanished from Earth's skies, like shadows retreating from dawn, their absence leaving a hollow silence in the atmosphere. Colonel Marcus Rook stood on the ridge, overlooking what remained of Denver, the city's skeleton picked clean by fire and time. The wind carried the scent of ash and thawing earth, the first whispers of spring gnawing at winter's corpse. Below, a ragged militia flag fluttered over a makeshift barricade, a school bus carcass spray-painted with the words "Body Bite Back." Someone had drawn a smiley face beneath it, the eyes X's. Rook turned his collar against the wind. Victory tasted like rust. They'd given him a medal, of course. A polished disc of titanium, etched with the date of the Vorath's retreat. He'd left it on the podium during the ceremony. Walking out to the sound of choked applause, the press called him a hero. The survivors called him Stalker, the name sticking like gum to a boot. Only Elena still used Rook. She'd said it once, leaning against his truck as the cameras buzzed, her voice a blade of dry humor. You're still a bastard, but you're our bastard. Then she'd tossed him a flask of whiskey, and vanished into the crowd. Now, 2 months later, he stood at the edge of his daughter's grave. The cemetery was a quiet pocket of the Rockies, pines standing sentinel over weathered headstones. Lily's plot lay beneath a dogwood tree, its branches bare, but for a few stubborn leaves clinging like scabs. The stone read beloved daughter, but the dates beneath were a lie. She'd been 8, not 9, when the poacher's stray bullet found her. Rook had been in Kenya, tracking a white rhino for a Russian oligarch. The client had wanted horns for his yacht's staircase. He knelt, the frozen earth biting through his jeans.
The Vorath claw, Kara's claw, weighed heavy in his pocket. He'd carried it since Keto, its edge honed to a razor gleam, a trophy, a penance. He laid it on the grave, the obsidian curve stark against the snow. "I'm done hunting," he said. The words dissolved into the wind, unanswered. The cabin welcomed him with creaks and groans, the porch steps sagging under his weight. Inside, the cloaked gnomes still lurked in corners, their grins dust-coated but vigilant. Fred watched from the mantel, one ceramic ear chipped from an Amazonian skirmish. Rook poured a bourbon, the glass trembling faintly in his grip. The doctors called it nerve damage. He called it truth. He found the photo that night, tucked between the pages of a ledger he hadn't opened in years. Lily on a beach, her smile a crescent moon, toes buried in sand he'd never felt. Elena must have left it. There was no note, none needed. He stared at it until dawn seeped through the curtains, the child's laughter in the frame, a ghost his ears couldn't conjure. Spring thickened, the Alaskan tundra shedding its snow like a molting beast. Rook took to walking the perimeter each morning, shotgun slung over his shoulder, boots crunching through crusts of ice. The traps were still active. Old habits, old fears. She found him by the lake, the ice fracturing into mosaic shards under the sun's glare. Kara's ship was a sliver of black against the clouds, descending without fanfare. She emerged alone, her mane thinned by scars, one foreleg replaced by a prosthetic of Vorath make, sleek, serrated, humming with latent violence. They faced each other across the ice, the lake groaning beneath them. "You're persistent," Rook said. Kara's translator emitted a staticky growl. "You remain, a stain endures." He shrugged. "We're good at that." She limped forward, her prosthetic claw scoring the ice. "My kin sing new sagas, of chaos, of chaos," the translator hissed, struggling, "of shame." Rook studied her, the proud predator, brought low by gnomes and rancid honey. "Why come back?" She bared her fangs, not in threat, but something closer to kinship. "To see the rot that felled the oak." He almost smiled. "Enjoy the view." She huffed, a sound that might have been laughter. Then she turned, her ship's ramp lowering with a sigh. "We will not meet again, Kavash." "Good." She paused, her back to him. "Your cub, the one taken by Claw. She is sung in our halls." His breath stalled. "What?" "A ballad of irony. The hunter orphaned by lesser beasts." She glanced over her shoulder, golden eyes glinting. "It is undignified, but memorable." The ramp sealed, the ship ascended, leaving Rook alone with the wind, and the weight of a daughter's memory, now etched in alien stars. He found Elena at a roadside diner outside Fairbanks, her booth strewn with napkin sketches, Vorath anatomy, toxin formulas, a half-finished portrait of Torres. She didn't look up as he slid into the seat opposite. The jukebox played Patsy Cline, the lyrics frayed by static. "They're writing songs about her," he said. Elena's pencil paused. "Lily, in a way." She nodded, as if she'd expected it. "The living mourn, the dead become stories." The waitress brought coffee, the steam blurring the air between them. Elena stirred in cream, her wedding band glinting. He'd never asked about it. Some questions were traps. "What now?" she said. He sipped the coffee, bitter, honest. "The gnomes stay, for a while. And you?" He thought of Lily's grave, the Vorath claw gleaming under the dogwood, of Kara's ship dissolving into the horizon, of Fred, gathering dust but still guarding the hearth. "I wait," he said. She slid a napkin across the table, a sketch of him, younger, fiercer, the scar on his jaw, a lightning bolt of rage. Beneath it, a single line, "The rot endures." He pocketed it. They didn't say goodbye. That night, he dreamed of the savannah. The leopard circled him, its flank whole, unmarred by bullets. Lily sat cross-legged in the grass, weaving a crown of dandelions. "You can stay," she said, her voice the echo of a voice he'd forgotten. "But you have to let go of the gun." He woke to the click of Fred's cloaking device cycling off, the gnome's grin visible in the moonlight. Outside, the first rain of spring pattered against the roof, washing the tundra clean. Rook rose, his bones aching, his shadow stretching long and lean across the floor, a hunter's shadow, a survivor's. He left the shotgun on the wall rack. The dawn found him on the porch, a steaming mug in hand, watching the ice retreat. Somewhere beneath the mud, a cloaked gnome waited, just in case. The Vorath's words lingered, a refrain in the wind. The rot endures. He sipped his coffee, let it